Namaste. My name is Aaron. I am a co-owner of Samadhi Ayurveda. I live down here in Arizona and I've been studying Ayurveda and yoga for a very long time, specifically Raj Yoga. And so I started meditating when I was a little boy, about 8 years old, 9 years old, somewhere in there. Helped keep the magic alive within me through those interesting years where it seems like the magic is really being pulled from you. But here I am today, and all of you and some of my closer friends have asked me to make a video, less than 20 minutes, on the path of enlightenment and how that might go. So what I'm basically going to be doing is describing to you the perspective of the evolution of the soul. Alright? And every yoga practitioner and yoga teacher should understand this. This comes from the system of Sankhya, which is an ancient philosophy. It is said to be the oldest philosophy on the planet, but who really knows about that? So, here goes. We're basically talking about consciousness today, and we have the best measuring tool of consciousness right inside of us. Okay, it's our minds. All right, our minds are a channel for consciousness. It's quite unique and wonderful that we get to exist in these human bodies for a period of time. So let's look at this. The mind has three functions. All right, the D, the Driti, and the Smriti. Okay, so the D, which is DHI, is the ability to perceive. Okay, we're talking about focusing and perceiving something. Alright? That's the D. The Driti is remembering, or the ability to retain this perception. And the Driti or the Smriti, excuse me, is the ability to recall old information. Okay, so memories and perceptions. That's the mind. Alright? It's a focusing mechanism, something that we can use for concentration and focus on a particular object or perception of some sort or another. Alright? Now this mind that we have has three basic plugins to it, okay? And then it has the five senses as well. But anyways, three basic plugins on the conscious field. And then of course the five senses, which are a little more gross, a little more out into the physical world. The first plugin is the universal mind. Alright? Universal perspective, I could say. Alright? The second one is the individual perspective, or the individual mind. Okay? And the third one is the ego. In Sanskrit they're known as Mahat, universal, Buddhi, individual, and Ahamkara, the ego. Alright? I'll go through each one of those and explain some characteristics of each of those. Universal mind, alright, right here. We'll say this is the universal mind. Above it is the masculine and feminine creative qualities, okay? So this is God and Goddess, and above that is just divine. But it works through this masculine and feminine way and goes into the universal mind, which offers a perspective of love. Okay? The universal mind loves everything. Okay? It's omnipotent, pure love. It's hard to tell that it's even there because it's so steady and pure and permeating. Okay? It's in everything, and especially in every bit of us, because it supersedes our entire being. Alright? So that's the universal mind. It loves everything. It also has a creative force moving through it. Okay? So it expands everything. If we concentrate on something in our mind, that something expands. Whether it be worry or something wonderful, it expands. Okay? But, anyways, next we'll go over the individual mind, the buddhi. Okay? The individual mind is discerning, but in a really detached way. Okay? So, it's completely detached. It doesn't come from a place of attachment in its discernment. It's like the voice of wisdom. Alright? It's not what the ego is, because the ego is discerning as well, but that comes from a place of attachment. This is the voice of wisdom. The universal mind is sort of the detached observer that loves everything. Okay? The buddhi, the individual mind, detached but discerning. It says, this is good for you. This is not so good for you. This is good for you. It's like your inner voice of wisdom, right? So that's the beauty of the higher mind, the individual mind. And then we have the ego, ahamkara. Okay? Now the ego is coming from a place of attachment, meaning I want this, I don't want this. I want this, I don't want this. Or I am this, and I am not this. Okay? There's a sense of I amness to the ego, when in reality, we're all of this. And since we're a universal being, we love everything. Okay? So we're one with everything. We're omnipotent ourselves in truth, but not all of us believes that. Right? I can relate to that. I hear it a lot, how we're all one and everything, but a part of me doesn't really believe it, because I have this delightful ego that I get to work with. That's part of being human. So, embrace it. Alright, so we have these three minds are especially plugged into our conscious mind on the conscious field. And then, of course, we have these five senses that perceive the different elements in the world, and also the five actions that we perform in our day-to-day world. Alright, we also have sattva, rajas, and tamas here. Okay? Sattva. Sattva is what we're striving for. Alright? Sattva is the agreement in the perceptions of the ego, the individual consciousness, and the universal consciousness. If they're all agreeing, then this ego is sort of shrinking, because if we're sharing the same perspective with the universal mind, then we don't feel separated from it. You see? That's sattva. Okay, we all have a certain level of sattva within us. Wonderful, wonderful. And it changes. Okay, the more we practice sattvic activities, the more that changes, and we become actually more sattvic. Okay, there's also rajas. Rajas is when the ego and the universal mind do not agree. Okay? When that's the case, there's this tension, right? Between the ego and the universal mind. And the universal mind loves everything. It doesn't mind having a little war going on. It loves it. It says, hey, that's fine. If you feel separate, I love you. That's great. Okay? And, but there's always going to be a natural motion towards becoming a universal being. That's just the creative force that's moving through you. Alright? It's because there's so much love. So we're coming from this place of I amness, and there's this rajasic experience going on. Rajas is like, there's emotion involved. There's serious stuff going on. It's when you're walking along and something that you didn't even know gives you this emotional charge just steps right into your life, right in front of you, right on this stage of your life, all right? And it's intense, it's emotional, it throws you off, you can't see clearly, you can't make the right decisions always. Some of these experiences when there's warring consciousness, they just can't be settled because the ego is too big, all right? It's just stubborn and it won't take the universal perspective, which is loving whatever is in front of you. So because of that, and we need to move on with our lives and survive and whatnot, that consciousness gets densified, okay? That little war, that it gets unsettled and put into this dense consciousness, all right? And this dense consciousness settles somewhere in our mind, which takes up our entire being, but it settles there, okay? Now, what happens is we have this heart lotus, right? And in the heart lotus, in the heart chakra, there's a gem. And this gem is basically the illumination of the soul. This is our universal mind. It has a light about it, okay? It's illuminated. That's the sattva, okay? Well, it dwells in our heart, this beautiful lit up gem, and sometimes our heart, the little flower has to close over it to protect it because this is our soul connecting it's where our soul is connected to our body, and there's this special glue called para ojas, and that para ojas needs to be protected now and then so your soul doesn't just slip right out of your body, okay? And that's what the job of the little heart lotus flower is around your heart. So hopefully it's open, because then you have the most light shining up. Sometimes just a couple petals close, sometimes all the petals close. Like if we get startled, or if we're in a car accident or something intense, or somebody angry comes at us, that heart lotus, it closes a little bit, okay? And we can't quite see the light as clearly, and that makes our ego voice a little bit louder, which is unfortunate, because that's really when we need it, is when some emotional situation comes up. It's best to be able to step into that individual mind and be able to hear the universal mind. But the thing is, that universal light, sometimes it's just not around because that heart lotus closes and we can't see it. And we make poor decisions, and that's when we go back and we apologize to people about making a poor decision and such. Alright? So, sattva, agreeing consciousness; rajas, disagreeing consciousness; tamas, densified, dark. It's like put it in the closet and shut the door kind of consciousness. Alright? Well, here's what happens. This light is illuminating up to the surface of the mind, which is right here, okay? This is the surface of the mind. In our being, we have these little densified tamasic material, okay? These little dark, dense spots. And from up here, the surface of the mind, we're looking down, and what we see are shadows, okay? In the light. So from our perspective, so this creative light, it's coming from here, and it's pushing, and half of this tamasic consciousness is getting this creative energy charging against it. And then the other half is turning into shadow, and that's reaching the surface of the mind. So we can't see that light anymore, where it used to shine. If we could, we would be very enlightened beings, because we would have just a ton of universal light shining on our consciousness. But instead, we have these shadows here and there, okay? And we can see a little bit of the light, but we see a lot of shadows. Alright? That's just part of being human, and that's why we're here. This creative force, it touches this tamasic material, and it pushes it, it vibrates, and it brings the creation of this very tamasic material back to the surface, okay? So that vibration of whatever this tamasic material is going to manifest in your life someday. Alright, this is past karma that's unsettled, okay? And it's going to manifest in your life someday. And wow, when it happens, it's going to come with an emotional charge. Alright? It's that rajasic situation, because tamas has to pass through rajas in order to become sattvic. And what helps it become sattvic? Taking the universal perspective and loving that. Okay? So this life experience, this human experience, when we have an emotional charge come up around a situation, it's a catalyst meant to bring more light to the surface of our minds so we can become wiser. Alright? That's our day-to-day work, is dealing with emotionally charged situations. Now, they could be emotionally charged in a good way. If there's attachment involved, we're going to be miserable later on, because when things come back down to the normal level, or whatever you want to call it, it's going to feel less than joyful because we were so high before. Alright, we can get attached to feeling good, and we can get attached to the experience of being miserable. Okay, we can get attached to our aversion to that ugly experience. Okay, like, I don't want this, I want this. Alright, and that's a big I. Alright? So, yeah, that's it. This creative force is hitting these tamasic materials. It's also hitting the surface of the mind. And when we focus, alright, when we focus on something that we want in a hopefully fun and detached way, this creative energy will have a creative response to whatever we're thinking of. But it has to be detached. If we're attached in that thinking, well, then we're just basically making more misery for ourselves, right? So it's an interesting game. We have to practice meditation and become established in equanimity and established in sattva. Alright? Finding that universal perspective. That will help our creative forces come into the physical plane. Okay? It's not an easy thing, it takes a while, and it's a long path. It's the path of the spiritual warrior. And the reason why it is the path of the spiritual warrior is because you got to be dang tough to face the garbage that you've been running from your entire life. Alright? That's what you're doing. You're turning and facing the stuff that's trying to chase you down. The stuff that you said, that's not me, I don't want that. Okay? It just starts chasing you then because of that creative force that's trying to catch up and help you create what you're afraid of. And you focus on it. And so you turn and face it. And you get established in equanimity through meditation, through doing different exercises. There's a ton of different ways of accomplishing this. You don't even have to do anything, and this will naturally work on its own. It's part of the human experience. But there are ways of accelerating this turning tamas to rajas to sattva. Okay? And then that neutralizes it, destroys the ego, and eventually you have this pure mind, buddhi, and universal mind, the mahat. And then you climb all the way up to experience purusha and prakriti and what's beyond that. What's interesting about sattva is it is detached in its nature, so it also is detached from itself. So sattva will eventually consume itself when you become purely sattvic. Okay? It starts destroying itself, and then you start climbing up and then experiencing that stuff. It's all in the Yoga Sutras, but I wanted to give it to you in about 20 minutes, and hopefully I did that. Thank you for joining me. Again, my business name is Samadhi Ayurveda. I do a course on Ayurveda in that, and it's under development right now. It's at an extremely reasonable price. Okay, it will be going up in price sometime in 2013, but right now in 2012, take advantage of it. The price is really low and it's a really comprehensive course online. It's a series of movies that I'm shooting with PowerPoints, and it's wonderful stuff. It'll help you get connected to nature. I actually have an hour and 15-minute talk that I do on this very subject that will give you a lot more details and some hints and tips on how to move through life in a more graceful way, perhaps, than we have in the past. So, thank you very much. Website is samadhiayurveda.com. Check it out, and please pass this video to your friends. Anybody else who's interested in yoga, they will appreciate it, and who knows, maybe it'll change some lives out there. Namaste.